We'll be starting at the top of the hour, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Hi, Megan. Welcome. Can we just wait a minute for a couple more folks and then we'll get started.
Hi, Janella.
Hi, Janella.
Hi. We could get started then, and then as folks join in, we can reintroduce ourselves. Chris, do you want to start us off?
Hey everyone, my name is Christopher Forden. I work with Santa Ana Streets. I'm the project director. Dorian's actually going to be doing the intro this time around, but yeah, Dorian is our project coordinator, so she'll take it away.
Can you share the PowerPoint and I'll just talk about it? So we are going to share. Oh, did you initiate the interpretation, Chris, or are we not doing that right now?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay, so we will be having interpretation, but not at the moment. But I would want to talk about SAAS a little bit. So welcome everybody to our walk assessment today. We're Santa Ana Active Streets, and we are a community-based coalition. We try to encourage the community to participate in creating safe and accessible active transportation here in our city. So the way that we do that is we try to partner with organizations and host community events, work directly with city officials, host classes, and things like that. And then the next slide, we have 3 pillars in our program. One of them is the Activate pillar. So we try to activate and support pedestrian and bicyclist use of the streets and public spaces. So some of the ways that we do that is by having fun bike rides. During COVID, we haven't been able to do our in-person bike rides, but we're hoping to do that a little bit more as the year passes. On the left side, you see that we've done walk assessments at nighttime, like bike lights, using bike lights and LED lights and stuff like that. On the right side was our Sassy Mujeres group of cyclists. They would meet during the summer and just bike around. Other stuff we do are traffic safety fairs and safety workshops. So these are low level of commitment. And we educate. So we do bike classes as well. We teach how to properly fit your helmet. Some programs we have are our wrench and ride program. So people learn how to work on a bike. They keep the bike at the end of this course. So by knowing how to work on a bike, they can be a little safer. So we're hoping to do this wrench and ride program starting in the summer. You can see that's one of our, we had our Lonely Hearts ride in February, and that's one of our leadership committee people teaching how to properly fit the helmet. And then another pillar is the Advocate pillar. So we advocate for progressive and equitable active transportation policy and infrastructure changes here in our city. So some of the things that SAAS has been involved in is street design projects, like the Complete Streets, Active Transportation Plan, helping out with the Santa Ana General Plan and the OCTA advocacy. So we help to prioritize active transportation grant projects. And in the summer, we are going to be doing a bike ride, starting at the bicycle tree, going through the streets, and then ending up at the riverbed. So we'll be promoting that soon. And so hopefully we can get people out, but wearing masks, etc. So we are excited to finally do another bike ride coming up in June. And then our other workshop will be this Muévete Santana. That workshop is going to be focused on knowing a little bit about how the infrastructure has changed in the city in the last 5-7 years, especially with a lot of the construction going on at the moment. There's a lot of changes, and if people were not aware of the plans that we'll look at, which are the active transportation plan, the downtown Santa Ana complete streets, and the central Santa Ana complete streets plans, this will be an overview of that, so that it may be postponed for a further date, but at the moment it's next week on Wednesday. And now to start our walk assessment, we have Alma Leiva from California Walks, who will be sharing her screen with her presentation.
Thanks, Dorian. Can you all see the screen where it says walk bike assessment? Yes, perfect. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you all for being here. My name is Alma Leiva. I'm with California Walks, and I'm excited to be here with y'all and talk a little bit about walking and biking assessments, how to do them, and why they're beneficial. Before we get started, I do want to share that we have interpretation. I'm not sure if anybody on here needs interpretation, but if you look at the bottom right of your screen, you can see where we have our little sun, because it's always a sunny day when we involve multi-ethnic communities. And so if you press that button, there'll be 2 different channels. You can do if you're comfortable with English, you can stay in English, but there's a Spanish channel available where we'll have 2 of our interpreters, Lluvia and Sagrario. And then, as you can see, we also have like the availability to chat. So if you have any questions or want to talk about anything, please feel free to use the chat. And you can mute and unmute with the buttons on the bottom left. So again, we're going to be here for a little bit. So make sure you're taking care of yourselves as you need to. And yeah, we're excited to be here. So if we want to start the interpretation channel, folks can join in. And I can also say it in Spanish in case, are there Spanish speakers? No? We're good? Okay. So just to share a bit about our project team, like I said, I'm Alma. We also have from UC Berkeley Safe Trek, we have Garrett, who will also be leading one of the routes, and Caro, who's also part of CalWalks, is on here too to lead one of the routes, is the third route. And then this training is a joint partnership between California Walks and UC Berkeley Safe Trek, where in specific cities to be able to support in improving walking and biking safety. And then we'll be working on this walking and biking assessment today, and that's mostly our agenda. So before we get into doing the biking assessment itself, I want to go over a bit about what's good design for walking and biking, and why a walking and biking assessment is important and why it's even needed. So the designs that I'm going to be sharing, and some of the infrastructure designs that I'll be sharing, are some of the things that you can look out for when conducting a walking and biking assessment. Now, sometimes in a lot of places, like our communities don't necessarily have all of these things that I'm going to show, but it's important to note those too, right? So that we know what are the things that are going to benefit folks that are walking and biking and make it safer for everybody to be able to be out and about in safe ways. The goal is ultimately to have the street designed for all users. So right now, the way that things are designed usually on the road is that it's very car-centric, right? It's very easy for somebody to have a car to get around, to for the most part feel safe in being able to get around in that vehicle, right? And but it's also important, and if not more important, for the streets to be designed in a way where community members that are walking and biking daily, that are part of the neighborhood, that are able to get around in ways that are safe and that are comfortable for folks, right? we're going to be focusing mostly on engineering and engineering things within the walking and biking assessment. But I do want to say that safety during a global pandemic and generally isn't always just tied to what the street looks like, right? So we understand that the street can be the most perfect street, have everything that's like pedestrian and bike oriented, and still be unsafe for people. And we've seen this highlighted during this pandemic. We've seen it highlighted through the Black Lives Matter movement, that being outside doesn't always mean that you're safe, right? Whether that's because of police presence, racial violence in this country, all of the inequities that exist within our community, right? So while this is like a starting point to feeling safe and being safe in public spaces, we know that it's not like the ultimate goal isn't just to have these freshly and newly designed streets. It's to be able to make sure that as a community, all the needs are met so that folks are able to move around freely, comfortably, and safely in their neighborhoods and in public spaces. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is pedestrian scale lighting. When conducting the walking assessment, we encourage you to pay attention to lighting and what's lighting like in the streets that you're walking. For the most part, in a lot of streets, the lighting is really geared towards cars. So like lighting up the street and not necessarily the sidewalk, which can make it really difficult or make it feel really unsafe when walking later on at night. Specifically, pedestrian scale lighting is something that's oriented towards the sidewalk and to pedestrian paths, and it's located closer to the ground and helps really illuminate the areas where folks are walking. High visibility road marks. You also want to be looking out for high visibility road markings, which emphasize a specific space for particular road users, whether this is signage or road markings letting you know that you're approaching a crosswalk, or as you can see, like these sharrows for bicycle use, making sure that noting whether or not those things are available in the community that you're walking and biking. There's fluorescent signage. You also want to make sure to consider signage. It increases the visibility of road signs, especially during periods where there's less light and low light or at night. And taking note of like what is there on the street that you're assessing, but also what's not there, right? And what's not being signalized that needs to be signalized. There's reduced speed limit signage, or reduced speed limit zones. So taking into account the speed of the vehicles and the places that you're assessing. Do they appear to be driving above the speed limit? And taking note of like what that's like. Sometimes depending on if it's available to you, there's also radar machines that you can use on the side of the road that detect how fast the car is going, and you can use that also to see like how often folks are speeding in a street or in a certain area, and note that for the data, right, and put that in the assessment as well. And then in particular areas such as like school zones and things, areas where there are senior centers, it's important to make sure that there's reduced speed limit zones in that area where most people or a lot of people are walking through. There's also the pedestrian head start. So during an in-person walking audit, as you approach an intersection, you want to typically see how long it's giving you to be able to cross the street and whether or not it's enough time for folks to be able to cross safely, or assessing like how long it takes for people to cross the street. Because as there are some streets that are a lot wider than others, and sometimes, you know, depending on folks' ability, they might not be able to cross the street all in one turn, right? And so being able to look at that and determining whether or not there's something needed to kind of separate that crossing a little more. Bike lanes. You can also look at the type of bike lanes and what type of bike lanes are present in your community, or what type of bike lanes, if they're not present, are needed within your community. Bike lanes are a section of the roadway that's designated just for bike use. It's supposed to be an exclusive space just for bicyclists, and there's different kinds, and each of them provide a different layer of protection. So I think the standard one that we always see is the conventional bike lane, which is just the strip of the white paint that's located on the right side of the roadway. But there's also a buffered bike lane, which if you look at it in the bottom left, also provides like that extra protection by creating a buffer with paint for folks to not be leaning in as close to the bike lane with their cars. But ultimately, I think one of the things that would help that make us feel even more protected within a bike lane is having a protected bike lane, and that has a physical separation between the vehicle and the lane. And so that looks a lot of different ways. Sometimes people use curbs, or they'll put like cones or planters. It's really something that you can get a lot more creative with, and just depending on like how the street design, it could be something that if it's a heavily used bikeway, that can be modeled in a specific way. And then finally, there's wayfinding, and you can analyze like what's available on your street that kind of signalizes different points of interest. You can often recommend wayfinding as a way to get more folks into biking to certain areas, let them know like the distance between a certain point and like I said, points of interest in the community. I know in Santa Ana, there's a lot of different places that are big in the city, right, that you can point out to, and it's really a way to be able to a system of signage and pavement markings that can help guide folks throughout the city to a lot of the popular destinations. Do folks have any questions about any of those? No? All right. So we're going to get into the walking assessments, and we'll be breaking out into groups in a little bit. But today's walking and biking assessment is going to be virtual. We're going to be using Google Street View since we are still unable to meet in person, which I know gives it a little different of a feel, but you can still get a lot of information from Google Maps. And as people that live in Santa Ana and that are using the streets daily, you all have like the most expertise, right? More than Google and anybody on like what those streets are like and things that like the day-to-day experience of being around. So sometimes the way that well, in like the Google Street View, it's not as updated as it might be today. So if there are things that are not on there now that you want to point out because it's like outdated and it just isn't like current, please let us know, and we can note that to know what's like now that it's like up to date. And again, like it gives us this visual, but it doesn't give us the lived experience. So that lived experience is gonna come from y'all. And before we split up, because we're gonna split up into 3 groups, we'll be doing 3 different routes, and I'll share what those are again in a bit. But just reminding that we are really relying on y'all as people that are there to kind of guide us through what's going on in those particular streets. And not just from your perspective, but what does walking and biking look like for people with different identities, right? So what is the walking and biking experience like for you individually, but also like thinking through what problems or what assets the street has for maybe somebody that has disabilities, or somebody or a child or an older adult. So everybody has like a different experience based on their identity, and we want to make sure that we're collecting as much information as we can to build something that's safe and good for everybody that is walking and biking or rolling on the streets daily. So the 3 routes that we're going to be looking at today are going to be, route 1 is going to be Valley High School, and that one's going to be led by Garrett. So let us know if you have a particular inclination to look at assessing Valley High School. The second route is going to be Santa Ana High School. So if you're from the Santa Ana High School area and you want to look at Santa Ana High School particularly, again, you can let us know in the chat. And then the third route we're going to look as Harbor Boulevard and First Street. We know that's a super busy intersection in Santa Ana too, and so we'll be looking at that area as well. So at this time, we can split up into those three groups. So if Chris, you want to break them out, okay. Zed wants route 1, Janella route 2.
And I will say if you're route 1, you can stay here in the main room. We'll just be doing route 1 right here.
And actually, I missed that. Route 1 is Santa
Route
Ana?
1 is Santa Ana. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I thought route 1 was, I might be forgetting the names, Valley.
Oh, so route 1 is Valley, but room 1, which is where they would break out to, is Santa Ana.
Yeah, I heard.
Okay, so we'll be sending folks to their breakout rooms.
I'm being invited to join room 1. Is that where you want me to be?
Yes.
Okay.
1 will be route 2.
Megan, did you have a preference? I think.
Okay, we'll have Megan go to route 3 with me and Dorian.
And Zed, I think we gave you a prompt to go to room 1. So if you can.
Oh no, Zed, I think it's fine if Zed stays in the main room because that's where route 1 is.
Okay.
It just got a little confused because the rooms are a different number.
Okay. So disregard that then.
Okay. Okay, so I will get rolling with us here in the main room. It looks like Megan may have rejoined us, but I'll start rolling anyway. Thank you for your patience, Zed. And since there's so few of us, I ideally would be a little more conversational. And so I wanted to invite you to unmute yourself if you like and introduce yourself to us, Zed.
Yes, sorry for my voice. It's I'm losing my voice, but this is Ed. I'm with the City of San Antonio's traffic engineering section. So I definitely work with SAAS, and I work well with Christopher. So I'm happy to be here, join the walking audit.
Great, awesome, thank you. And I promise I won't plague you with too many questions to save your voice. And since I don't, I actually have never been to Santa Ana still. Hopefully I will one day. So hopefully soon, right? So I won't know any local issues to plague you about anyway. Okay, so I will go ahead and share my screen, and we'll sort of walk through this.
Here, I'll give you access right now. Go ahead.
I hadn't tried to press the button yet. Here we go. Okay, let's find the right. It's a guessing game. Here we go. All right, so here we're looking at our map of Route 1. And then if I've done this properly, it'll just boom, straight into Google Maps there. So what we're going to do is we're going to start looking up here at the northmost street at Edinger. And we're just going to sort of make a clockwise loop around and sort of see what we see around the school. So, and Zed and Chris are the local experts here. So I will, we can all sort of say what we see as I sort of walk through it. And I'll sort of take notes depending on what you all say, or to save your voice, Zed, if you have something, you could write it in chat as well. And I would put it in our notes here. So I'm just going to talk about what I see and think, and then throw it back to you all on occasion, or maybe more often than occasionally. But I will start with saying that one of the good things about doing a virtual audit like this is that we can have this bird's eye view, and we can start with a bird's eye view and then always like zoom back to it to reorient ourselves. And so to me, I see some shops, some nice food places, a taqueria all along Edinger here. So I see a liquor store as well. Maybe that doesn't count as a destination for the students, but there's a lot of destinations. There are a lot of destinations here for the students. In addition, there's 2 elementary schools. There's the school district office. There's high schools, or there's a high school. And there's homes. And so it's easy for me to imagine, but I have to imagine, since it is virtual, that there would be a lot of pedestrian activity, sort of crisscrossing and on both sides of Edinger here. And I see you nodding, Zed. So yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of high density apartments on the north side.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and we'll definitely see that as we go down Edinger to start with. So, okay. So I'm going to zoom in here right at the intersection of Greenville and Edinger. But I'll note that, well, let's just zoom in here. Let's just zoom in here and see what we see. So Alma mentioned the signal timing, and of course, we can't see any like real-time pedestrians. We can't measure the signal timing. So there's a limited amount that we can learn from Street View, but we will learn what we can here at the intersection of Edinger and Greenville. And I see some new people have joined us. So I'm just going to keep rolling, or are they going back to their room? I'm sure they'll figure it out. Okay. And so we look at our intersection here. We see that we saw from Street View, that's sort of an L. The crosswalks are sort of an L, with one long crossing across Edinger here, and then a short crossing across Greenville. The lines look good. They're yellow, of course, because we're near those schools. We see our bike lane. Well, sort of one of my sort of stories that I was sort of telling myself as I was reviewing this is we'll see how this bike lane works and doesn't work as we go along Edinger here. So we see it working here, and we can see sort of the buffer. And we can see where they're, oh no, I'm trying to get close enough to see some of the details of the bike lane. And so we see some small separations in our sort of bike lane here, right near the intersection. I don't think they go further back, but I see some little ones. They've got reflectors on them, which I guess I've not seen much of that before, so that's pretty neat. But they have reflectors on them to increase visibility at nighttime, so that's good. Looks like there might have been one here, and it looks like it got eaten by a car. That does happen. And I'm noting these now because we're not going to see them further on. And so we're going to see some of the ways that the car behavior changes when we don't have the separators further on. So I wanted to pause here at this intersection and see if anyone has anything to add, either in chat that they see or don't see at this intersection, or any thoughts about it. Do we get a lot of students crossing here? And if not, no worries. We will continue learning more about Edinger as we move eastwards. So I'll go ahead and click eastwards here. Oh no, is my internet going funny? Let me know if it is. I'll turn off my camera and that will help us out. Okay.
Yeah, there is a little bit of a lag.
Okay, there is. Okay, well, I'm going to turn my camera off then. And that hopefully will help out. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, well, that was a good. So here we see the school speed limit zone. We see this 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. And so I wanted to ask the local folks, in your experience, is 25 miles an hour the speed that you do generally see along this road? Or do people conduct their vehicles maybe a little faster than that?
I guess anecdotally, probably faster. I think that's one, at least I might have been one of the impetuses for like advocating for the Edinger bike lane. I know I remember even doing like, and we know that there's been collisions even like where that white fence is. I remember we did a rite of silence where we commemorated somebody that was hit in that area too. So,
all right.
And so if it was a loss of life. So if it's a loss of life, then I feel like that usually ends up being correlated with high speeds. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's such a good point. I'd harp on it. I feel like I'm probably preaching to the choir if I harp on that right now, but that is absolutely a great point. That the same collision at a higher speed is going to, go more forces on the human body, obviously. Yeah, that's a great point about how the road has changed. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That was before the bike lane implementation, but
Okay.
It seems like Zed, you're saying that it's still folks drive faster than 25. I'm assuming that's after the implementation, but
the 25 is for school when school's present, but most people don't abide by that.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. That it is when school is in speed limit. So, which means that sometimes people may not be aware, or they may not be thinking about like when school is in session. It's a really good point. And I'm sorry, chat wasn't appearing for me, so I'm sorry I missed what we've been writing in chat. So welcome, Megan. Okay, well, I'm glad you're able to listen in chat, and feel free to add chat messages in chat. I did a little bit of intro discussion, and I can repeat that if you would like me to. We are on Edinger, just north of sort of this set of schools down here, including Valley High School. So, okay, and I've got chat open now, so I won't miss future chat messages. I apologize for that. So I was going to show one of the features that using Google Maps lets us use, which is we can time travel with Street View here. And so obviously we can see that this footage was taken in November 2020. And if we go back one step to February 2020, there's no bike lane. So as Chris was saying, like we can see that the bike lane is a recent enhancement to the street. And so the street obviously did work differently. There was sort of a whole like parking lane here. I was trying to see if the lanes got a little narrower. They may have done. It's very difficult to tell. So a bit of a, one term for that could be a road diet. Maybe not here, maybe further on where the street kept the parking and added a bike lane. And so the space has to come from someplace else. In fact, I'm gonna move further down the road. Here we are getting close to where I think the high school is here finally at our intersection with Center. So, so here we see another intersection. Here we've got crosswalks all four ways. Do we get a lot of students walking here as well? I sort of assume we do because we literally have an elementary school on one corner and a high school on the other corner.
Yeah,
that intersection has a ton of kids crossing.
yeah.
Mhm.
A lot of families on the north side are constantly, or definitely in the north side of Edinger, they cross to the other side to access the school. They'll like go pick up their kids like on the other side too. Yeah, there's a lot of traffic.
Yeah. So thank you. That's really good. Lost the ability to spell here. And that brings up another good point that if we were like doing like in person, we would obviously want to like try to see what time of day or try to look at like the school entrance time of days. As we all have probably often seen in the past, like admission and sometimes school ending time as well is like a really hectic, like lots of cars, lots of people, like the families trying to like drop off kids. And so I was just imagining when I looked at this, sort of zooming out again from satellite view with like two elementary schools and the high school, I was sort of imagining it could kind of turn into, obviously once like schools come back in session fully, it could turn into a bit of a madhouse in the mornings sometimes with lots of people lots of families trying to drop off kids. So all in one area.
I do know that the schools there are staggered, there are times. So you do have a longer period of time when kids are crossing.
And actually, I think the like for car, I feel like the drop off area was like on Edinger, but further east. Like you can also see the cars kind of parked in that area. There's like near the parking structure area.
Right, and we can see like the arrows like drawn on the ground here to like generate a bit of a flow. Probably, though obviously we'd want to see it in person. I will say I was looking at this. I know we're spending a long time on this, but that's because I think it's probably where a lot of the traffic is. But I was wondering about how this flow works in person because families have to come in here, which means either turning right from along Edinger eastbound or turning left across Edinger westbound. But then they're sort of plopped back onto Edinger. And so it looks like you could almost like families trying to exit could almost get in the way of families trying to enter. So I was wondering how that worked in practice.
You know what? I don't think the school uses the driveway or the parking lot for drop off and pickup. Yeah, walking on it a few years back. There's a parking lot on Center. That's the one they're supposed to use. And then they're dropping off also in the front on Edinger. But the main designated is that one right there, the one you're showing just to the left. That's supposed to be the main drop off point because I posed a question too. Why don't you guys take advantage of the big parking lot? And I think they might be looking into that for the future.
Yeah. Okay, that honestly, that makes a lot more sense to me. It's because Center clearly is like more of a residential street. or at least it's not as busy as Edinger probably is. So it makes sense to have like a quieter drop off point. Yeah, and they do have other spaces to drop off. So, but then you never know, there's so many schools all in one area. Anyway, okay, so I will move along Edinger here. And we can see some of the apartments up here as well. So I wanted to zoom in here, point out, is this the right part of Edinger? Did I go too far? Well, so here we can see where some folks are trying to park along Edinger. And we've got some parking spots. We've got the bicycle lane inside of the cars, which is the best practice, right? To put the parking between bicycle lane and the car and the traffic lanes. But because the posts aren't here for whatever reason, this cars sort of scoot in, which is sort of underlines this idea that even once we our minds from becoming a driver to like, oh, my car is parked now. Then we realize that this traffic lane is right there. Let's give them some space. And so I think we all naturally sort of scoot in a little bit if we can, which then of course cuts into the buffer on the bike lane. And in some cases, if you've seen other cars scoot in, you scoot in even more. And so I was fighting to get a good view of this because this car sort of gets in the way. But if we zoom all the way in, we can see that this wheel is sort of like crossing over all the way. They've eaten up almost the whole buffer now, and they're really starting to scoot in to that bike lane. And so we can see where the parked cars have started to sort of eat into the bike lane space and edge out of, you can see how much parking space there is here, right? Sort of edge out of their own space. Naturally, because of the traffic that's sort of passing right by their doors. But it does sort of eat into the space of the cyclists.
Yeah, Zed, curious, I thought that bollard posts were actually put more recently. I'm not sure.
Yes, they are. The picture was taken when it was still under construction.
Yeah.
Okay. So but this is a perfect example of what not to do. So it just took us a while for the contractor to get the delineators and the wheel stops out there.
Yeah, I remember when it first went up, I saw some posts that were actually more spread out and cars squeezing in to actually still find space to park and block the bike lane. So
I believe it.
That was like early on though. So I haven't been out recently.
Yeah, we had to do a lot of outreach just to make sure they park in the right spot, but it seems like it's been resolved. We just had a hard time working with the contractor to get those delineators in at the end of the project.
Yeah.
Okay, I hear it. And that's a really good point about sort of like education, right? And I don't mean education in like like finger shaking, like, oh, this is how you use the bike lane. But as we're looking in Street View, like this was a relatively new, like as you're saying, this was still being constructed. And so people are still trying to figure out like, okay, so we used to park right on the edge. Now we park in a slightly different spot. Like, what is the way we're all going to sort of use the street? And so I see this nice green car here as sort of an illustration of that, as sort of like trying to creatively find, where to park and where not to park. This car has sort of engineered themselves a parking spot where there is none and there's not supposed to be, even though there's a large number of parking spots that they may or may not recognize are parking spots. Just on the other side of this little sort of driveway here, this little access here. So just a note, sort of being sort of forgiving for everybody about like, clearly people are still trying to figure out how to navigate the roadway and navigate the changes in the roadway. So, and you're right, it was taken in February, or I guess in November 2020. So yes, things have changed. Bollard posts are in place. We would love to see how the behaviors, how people have learned how to use the road now. Okay. So I will jump forward. And
I'll say one thing though, that stretch on Edinger, like, I think specifically on the school side, it feels very long. So in terms, I'm thinking also of just the pedestrian like amenities of walking it.
Yeah.
It's sparse on trees, and a lot of Santa Ana has some really great tree coverage. So definitely in that area, it feels a lot longer. So just yeah, and I'm mostly also looking around for like street lighting and stuff. And I know there is some on the north side. I see some of those, but with that photo of the pedestrian focused ones, or like the
Right.
human focused ones, it definitely could be used there. I could see that.
Right. Yeah. And that's a really, really great point. We see another one sort of down a bit here. But yeah, these are like, obviously traffic focused lights rather than pedestrian focused lights. Because pedestrian focused lights would be sort of further down, like at pedestrian level. They'd be more closely placed, which would sort of help then sort of, in the minds of when you're driving a car, like, oh, this is a more like, oh, the lights are like lower down, it's more of a neighborhood, that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. So I don't want to preach to the choir. So I want to have the right balance here. And it is a long stretch, and we did talk about how a lot of these larger homes, a lot of apartments on the north side, folks are crossing to the south side. And we do have, we do have crosswalks at either end, but it is a bit of a stretch. And so I do wonder how many people are tempted by some of these cuts here, some of these walks, because the fence isn't continuous. So I do wonder how many folks are tempted to try to attempt mid-block crossings, which now with the road diet is maybe not quite as crazy, but it's still pretty crazy because you've got parked cars potentially obstructing view. You do have 4 lanes of travel, and the passing lane in the center is not as obviously a safe place for pedestrians stand either, especially since people are often looking around when they're in that turning lane, looking for their slot to turn and not looking for someone standing there. So it would be certainly still an unsafe place to attempt a mid-block crossing. So we don't know how much of that is occurring. All right. So I have probably spent much more time than I should on this stretch, but I wanted to talk about this stretch.
It's a major one,
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the where the traffic is significantly here.
Could I ask a question? Have you seen anything else out there that specifically for like corridors like this? I know, beyond the road diet to control speeds? Because that's one of the things that we're really battling. How to make sure that we get the speeds lower.
Mm-hmm.
We're narrowing lanes. We're putting in bike lanes. We others put buffers and so forth. But I don't know if there's anything else that you've encountered somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, the trees and the lighting are ways to not only make it friendly pedestrians, but to sort of convince cars that there's, more stuff going on here. I know a mid-block crossing is for pedestrians. It's not for slowing down cars. But like, I wonder about the turning lane as well. I don't want to come down too hard on any one thing or the other, and so I don't know, what the specific specifications are for this turning lane being here. But I do wonder if the whole thing needs to be a turning lane, or if it's possible to have more, even if they aren't pedestrian islands, more, what's in the median or neutral ground or whatever the right word for it is, in the center here. And I feel like we saw that elsewhere on the stretch.
Okay, yeah, that's one thing that we're trying to look at too. Just even if you put trees and stuff, visually it'll make the corridor a little bit smaller.
Right. Did we see some, or maybe they were just turning lanes and I'm imagining things. Anyway, but
I think further east there are medians, I think, on Edinger. Or
over by Ray.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's Ray. Yeah, so we see a little median here. So maybe because there aren't, well, see, I don't know how many people are turning, and I don't know where the other accesses to these are. There aren't other accesses to some of these, so I don't know, but maybe there's capacity for putting more medians in or something like that.
The only other street that I've kind of seen the stuff like this, and it's something I've been wondering about, like in Cesar Chavez in Boyle Heights, I did see bulb outs to pinch at the intersection to make it smaller, and that street has 2 lanes both sides. The only difference here is that it doesn't have a center turn lane, and it does cause traffic to go a lot slower. But they also have more crossing points. So that's like a whole other conversation, but I have seen that, and it has helped to slow down traffic a lot. But because this is such a big street, it's one of those things where it's like, bulb outs also be a component of this too? So I don't know.
That's a really good point, Chris. And I just looked at Townsend here while you said that. That is Townsend. And we see, at least in the satellite view, like a pretty generous like slope here. Like that's a pretty fast or potentially pretty fast like zip for cars, especially if there's not someone parked. Okay, it looks like it's changed. So the satellite, well, it's hard to know.
No, the curve return didn't change. That's something we will love to do.
Okay, yeah, it's tightened up like this corner here, especially since this is like, as we can see, like a residential like street anyway, with lots of parking. Like people obviously are going to go real slow on here anyway. So at least this curve, these 2 curves here could be like bulbed out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
For the others, I mean, they're flat right against. So but maybe a little bulb outs on either side would help people. Would also help prevent like cases like that one car we saw, like parking in a spot that wasn't marked for parking and sort of limited the visibility of people entering and exiting that area. Where was it? Right here, right? Or potentially limiting the visibility, as if there's a way to like bulb that out. I don't know how that would work though, because these are like drives rather than roads. So. All right, so there's some things. Okay, and let me see how much time I have left here.
10 more minutes.
10 more minutes, okay.
I was broadcasting it out to everybody, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'll actually move fairly rapidly down rate here unless someone shouts and tells me not to. Because rate, has a continuous fence from what I saw along the school side, though who knows what students do. Some of them may jump it. I don't know. But also there's not, there are things over here, right? There are like housing developments over here. But there's not that many openings. And so I just don't know how much pedestrian traffic there is along here, other than people just like walking along or biking along to get where they're going. So, and you've got nice, like big pedestrian, like passageways pretty much, especially on sort of the east side of the road. So I don't know how many hazards or conflicts there might be along right here, because there just aren't that many intersections. So obviously we've got one here, which obviously, like if a bunch of pedestrians use this, then you could say, well, okay, look, there aren't any aren't any marked crosswalks, but I don't know how many pedestrians really use this because there's not, this is like a school. I don't know. See, this is where I'm lacking the local knowledge again, right? Is this like a main entrance or is this a utility entrance open accidentally once?
That's actually a joint use entrance. So the city does have access to the school for some type of activities.
Okay.
I don't know the details about it, but I know that's why that fence is there.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So we just don't know how much, how many conflicts there are along the street versus how many people just moving along it. And so I'm going to move along it as well, to get to some of our smaller streets further down. Or I'll just do this since it stopped cooperating. Okay. So here we have our intersection with Glenwood. And well, first off, let's stop zooming in and we can see the evidence on the street of in Oakland here. We call them sideshows. I don't know if we have a different term for them in Santa Ana. But we can see some evidence of a sideshow. Yeah, still a little bit. So I guess I could ask that I mean, so we see that there is that the residents like report that as a problem. Obviously that happens, you know, at least around here, it happens typically on like weekend nights or like during the day on the weekend, not so like doesn't really disrupt school necessarily, might disrupt other things, but doesn't disrupt school. So I don't know if it's this like high priority concern for residents or not. I'll write it down anyway.
Just a note, those donuts have been there's been an increase of those overall because of the COVID with people staying home.
Sure.
Yeah,
So that's definitely a concern, not just to the residents, but to the city as well.
Yeah.
Any ideas on how to prevent that? We haven't found one yet.
No, absolutely not. No, I don't. I read some articles, but I don't know either. There has been an increase here as well in Oakland. So maybe people just, as they get other things to do, it'll decrease again.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay. All right, so here we have Glenwood, which is a smaller street, and I guess my thesis for this street is that even though it's smaller, we see the speed limit there is 15. I'm going to argue that based on the evidence that I'll see as we move along, or that I saw when I'm looking at the street previously, it looks kind of busy for a small residential street. And maybe it was just the time of day this footage was taken. But we see school buses, a lot of school buses along it. We see a few speed humps, but we see a lot of traffic and not a ton of other markings other than the bump and the marking for the speed hump itself. We see two speed bumps coming from the larger road from Rate. I spelled it in my notes. And then the markings just sort of, so we see a stop marking there, but there aren't really lane markings. There's no bicycle lane. And I think I understand why that is. It's because it's a smaller sort of out of the way road. But I do wonder if there's like a lot of traffic along this during school hours or, during school let-in or drop off. And if we get some havoc back here on the side road. And maybe it's low speed havoc. And so it's just a headache and it's not actually dangerous, as we talked about before with speed. So here we see sort of one marked crosswalk to get to the school. I don't actually see an entrance nearby. Maybe there's one a little further down. But there are some, unlike Rate, where the fence was pretty continuous, except for that one.
Was there a missing wheelchair ramp on the north side of the crosswalk? I didn't see it. I think.
Yeah, that's a good catch. Yes, there's no curb cut here.
Oh yeah, you're right. Wow.
Yeah.
And actually, because I know in T intersections usually you just have one crosswalk, but I see the curb ramp on the west corner.
Right.
Would it make sense not to actually put a curb ramp on the opposing side too, or because I know that the delineated crosswalks, how it's been painted, it's how it's usually designed at those T intersections, but. Because also there's that little white line right there for the car, for that car where it stopped right there. So
Right.
I'm just like,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously you see T intersections painted all sorts of different ways. I mean, you can see them, right? So I don't know, maybe the low or the potentially lower pedestrian traffic. I don't really know. I wouldn't be surprised if you had pedestrians cross all sorts of different ways here because it's not that wide. It sort of looks kind of residential. There are curves in the road and there's people parked. And so people probably aren't racing through here. But once again, we would obviously want to like observe in person or talk to local residents to see, you know, maybe when there aren't a ton of buses here, maybe people do drive pretty fast along here. I don't know. Let me write that down. I'm missing.
okay, gonna be closing the room. So we got 60 more seconds before everybody comes.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm basically out of time. We do see the speed bumps here, but I did want to compare this street, Glenwood, to Greenville here, which is sort of the same width, but has a lot more markings on it. And I wasn't quite sure why that was. Why Greenville has sort of bike lanes and center line markings, and just a lot more markings than this sort of road of similar width on the side, Glenwood.
Yeah, Greenville definitely has a lot more volume in terms of traffic and speeds.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like it acts almost like a collector.
Okay.
And
yeah, so it's more collector, and it's straight. So yeah, you could get speed.
And that shows a good shot right there. We dropped the bike lane there. We're looking at maybe trying to see how we could continue the bike lane all the way across.
All right, we're out of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I need to stop sharing my screen. Oh, usually a thing pops up. There we go.
Yay, welcome back everybody. Thank you for all of your great input in these different routes and like walking assessments. I know I learned a lot. Do folks want to share out a little bit about what went on in their group and some maybe like a highlight of the things that they learned about walking and biking assessments?
Yeah, so I was in Route 2 and we noticed that there is no yellow street crosswalk. The lights are very far apart and there's any bus shelter. And the sidewalks when you cross to Santa Ana High School, they're very narrow. So kids might even be standing on the street.
Thank you, Andrea. I was about to say that's great, but it's not great that those problems exist, but it's great that you're able to recognize them and share them so that we can let folks know, right? That there are definitely changes that need to happen around that area.
I'm sorry, this is it. Could I they mentioned First Street and the sidewalk. We do have a project to widen the sidewalks, by the way. I just want to share that. So it is funded, it's coming down the line. So I'm very happy about that. Thank you for noticing that.
Yay, that's great.
What about Walnut and Flower said? Walnut and Flower, near Santa Ana High School. You have any projects coming up there?
No, not at this point. The project I was talking about is literally just along First Street. But yeah, that's going to be a great project because the kids do stand on the street.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yay, thank you both. And yeah, that's definitely part of the reason why walking and biking assessments are so important, because they really do let folks know and allow community members to be part of this planning process along with the city planners, right? And letting them know what is needed, and then work towards making sure that streets are safer for folks. What about group one? Do you want to share anything that came up in your group or in your assessments?
We took a lot of time on Edinger, I think, because it was like one of the biggest streets. I think we were trying to mine our local knowledge, but it was a little difficult because there's some the other, it's like connecting streets to Edinger or Round Valley had some issues. So like we noticed like one, there's like Zed noticed a curb ramp that was missing on the south side of Valley. On Edinger, kind of, we were just talking about how to also slow down traffic, because right now there's a newly implemented bike lane on there. So then we started talking about maybe bulb outs as we were looking at one side street because we noticed like it was pretty wide open, so you can kind of really quickly turn into it. So pinching that kind of crossing points. And we did talk a little bit about lighting on Edinger too. So yeah, there's we definitely recognize that because there's the two schools, there's Valley, then there's Carr, then there's the one on the north side. I forgot what the name of it is. But yeah, basically there's a lot of schools in the area, and so we definitely see that there's when school's back in session, wondering how the cars will kind of be dropping off the kids, but we notice that there's a lot of pedestrians though, just even walking to the schools like all the time. So
Yeah, and then in that particular area, the schools are like very much in the like community neighborhoods and stuff, so people are like walking around anyway. So I'm glad y'all were able to talk about a lot of the things that came and come up with a lot of solutions, it sounds like, too. So that's great. Dorian, do you want to share a bit about group 3?
Yeah, we were on Harbor and First. Something we did talk about was how busy that intersection is, and how some of the sidewalks do feel small, because there's a lot of public transit users who are coming in and off of buses, and so sometimes the sidewalks do feel crowded. So if there is somebody on a wheelchair, and then there's a pedestrian, it just feels a little bit tight. So yeah, making the sidewalks a little bit wider there in that street. And then we noticed that the distance from, I think, Harbor and First to Jackson Street, and then Jackson Street to Fairview, it's like a long distance, so people are kind of forced to jaywalk. So that's one thing. And not all of the bus stops had shade. The main ones like at Harbor and First and Fairview and First did, but in between there were some bus stops that didn't have the shade. And then definitely, I think only a part of First after Harbor had a bike lane, but after that there weren't any, on Fairview or First over there.
Thank you. And then Caro noted also that none of the bus stops that were in their route had bus shelters, and it gets really hot out here. So definitely something important to note. But thank you all for everything you shared. I hope this was really helpful in one, getting to do and getting to like get that knowledge around walking and biking assessment, but also helpful in being able to conduct your own walking and biking assessments. with other folks in your community. Again, this is something that can that is really beneficial in getting that experiential data from folks that are experts because they live there and understand like what it's like to have to navigate the streets on a day-to-day basis, either as a pedestrian or as a bicyclist or a public transit user, right? And so the street is very different to navigate as we take on different roles and different identities. And so are there any questions or any comments or concerns that folks have around walking and biking assessments?
I apologize. I had some technical issues, so I logged in a little late, but I was just kind of curious in the terms of the timing when the assessment will be completed in terms of like a report, because I want to make sure that we get a copy of that if possible, so we could always reference that for the applications, because that's always been extremely beneficial. So, you know, when you guys get that, please give me a copy, and we could definitely reference that information in the applications.
Yeah, thank you for that, Zed. And so we're, each of us that were facilitating a route took notes. And so we have everything that folks shared in a document that we'll share with SAAS. And as they're also doing their own walking assessments, can put together something that can be shared with the city to support additional projects that are needed.
You guys do all the work. We'll take the credit for it.
It's a team effort. And we actually have,
thank you guys.
We actually have a youth walk assessment I think we're working on right now. We have a club out in Santa Ana High School. So it's just good to know that we can definitely pass that on to you when we're doing those things for sure.
Yeah, and any of those things, really, I mean, we'll keep them. And I mean, the Integer Bike project that we were talking about, you know, that was KidsWorks. They did a lot of that work, and that helped us actually get that grant. It made that grant very unique.
We actually have the club, the Santa Ana High School Youth Club president present today, Andrea.
Hi.
Big shout out to you.
Caro, are you going to share something?
I was just gonna tell you, said I'm gonna be begging you soon about a leadership group that we're leading with some of our other work that isn't related to this, and the students will have public comment to give to you.
Cool. No
And
worries. Welcome on. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Y'all feel ready to do your own walking and biking assessments with other folks?
every day I can't stop talking about the sidewalks when I walk with my family. They're like, be quiet already.
Same. I'll be like with my little brother and I'll be like, hey, this is missing this, and this, and this. And he's like, how do you know? I'm like, because I know.
That's
funny.
Thanks y'all. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And then I'm putting in the chat an evaluation if folks are able to fill it out, just so that we can continue to improve our workshops and the content. Thank you again, everybody, for being on and for participating. It was really great to hear all this. And again, we'll compile all of the notes that we took about the assessments and give it to SAAS so that y'all can share it out. Yeah.
Thank you, CalWalks. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye.